Welcome to this episode of Healing Digestion, where I'm doing 10 most frequently asked questions on different foods through the lens of Ayurveda. If you're new here, this is Healing Digestion. I'm Deepa. I'm an allied functional medicine practitioner, bio-individual nutrition practitioner, an Ayurvedic practitioner, and a yoga acharya for more than 25 years. I love to create synergy between ancient wisdom and modern science. And if you're here today and if you have more questions outside of these foods, do leave a comment and I'll make sure that I answer them. When do you recommend eating raw food, or if eating raw food at all? What are your thoughts on this? So, fruit in Ayurveda, one of the big things of Ayurveda is that you keep the gut balanced by the principles of the right food combination. And the biggest culprit, or what is called Viruddha Ahara, bad food combination, which today we know can lead to the fermentation, is combining food with fruits. So, for example, eating mangoes or pineapples or any fruit with breakfast where there's heavy proteins like eggs and toast, combining fruit and food is probably the most biggest culprit in gut dysbiosis, because the fruit gets stuck there with food and then it doesn't pass through the GI tract as soon as it should, and this leads to fermentation of bad bacteria like Candida and H. pylori. So really, fruit should be eaten by themselves. Can you eat raw fruit? I think every fruit has a different quality, and Ayurveda broke these down into the 6 tastes: the Shadrasa, which is Madhura sweet, Lavana salt, Amala sour, and then pungent, bitter, and astringent. So these tastes really come into understanding the qualities of every food, including a fruit. Now, an apple, for the longest time, I thought apples were my enemy, but I never understood that apples that are raw are astringent, but apples that are cooked are madura. They're soft. They actually help to repair the gut mucosa. So it really depends. Certainly, we can't be cooking fruits like mangoes. We need to enjoy them as they are. And this is why Ayurveda gave a lot of principles and guidelines, such as mango is the only thing that can be combined as a fruit with milk. So mango milkshake is really probably something which will work for some, but again, not for everybody. So usually if a food feels very dry, it is better that it's stewed a little bit. So apples, pears, nectarines, these sort of fruits do really well when they are stewed and softened. Certain fruits, of course, like melons and watermelons, are best eaten by themselves because they're very light in nature, and this is what science call, they have a very high glycemic load. While they have fiber, there's a lot of water, so they digest really quickly, so they shouldn't even be eaten with other fruit. Is it a good time to eat a cold food like a smoothie or an ice cream? Because realistic, I want to enjoy something like this with my children. This is a common question that I receive a lot. And really, while Ayurveda is very much anti cold foods, because today we also know that cold foods shrink the blood vessels in the gut and they weaken digestion. So anything that's warm will make it work for the gut, anything that's cold will weaken digestion. However, we've all had times where we've gone out for something and we really want to be part of the family, as long as it's something which is occasional, where we do follow principles 80% of the time, and then the rest of the time we let loose. Our digestion should be able to handle it. So maybe having a cup of hot water after an ice cream can work. Also, noticing if you have blood sugar crash after an ice cream where you feel extremely sleepy, that's a sign that you're not able to metabolize those sugars well, which means it's probably better to stay away from it. But usually you can have a little bit of a hack, that anytime you do have something like that, have hot water, and the next meal make sure you lighten your meal so your digestive system can come back to balance. How does Triphala work, and does it help the system? Triphala is the most widely used herb, and I think it's now gone from used to abused, and it can become like senna, where it scrapes away the mucous membrane over time. Triphala has a wonderful property that it contains all, out of the 6 tastes, it has 5 tastes, which means it's almost a complete food by itself. But in somebody with severe constipation and already aggravated vata, it can make them even more dry. In somebody with high pitta, it can make them even more aggravated because it is a little activating or pitta provoking. So it really depends on when is it used, how is it used, how much is used. Ideally, if you bring the body to balance, you should not need to rely on it all the time at all. So my idea is always that bring people to a state where after that they don't need a herb like Triphala. However, in some cases, for example, travel time, it can be helpful because rather than getting choked up and constipated, it can help to keep things moving when you don't have control in too many other areas. Ayurveda say about eggs? So certainly the egg has been vilified a lot. For the longest time in the scientific world, it was thought that the yolk causes cholesterol. So this egg white obsession happened, and it's continuing to wreak havoc because most people are eating only the egg white. Ayurveda very systematically says that when you take a food and pull it apart into different components, there can only be problems. While eggs are certainly harder to digest than even chicken, I think they're a whole food when they're used by themselves, but certainly form matters. Grass fed free range is key. You can't have caged antibiotic chicken eggs, and that's going to cause a load on the liver. The second thing is how much do you eat? Eating 4 or 5 eggs in the morning by themselves as protein can only weaken someone's digestion. I see it over and over again. Whereas having one egg with a lot of vegetables can be a very different matter. So it really depends on timing. Can you digest? What is the state of Agni? If you can't digest it, you're going to end up in problems. And loading the morning meal with too many eggs just because it's protein is a recipe for disaster. Are nuts and seeds nutrient dense or are they food allergens? This is a fantastic question. And most often you hear so many people talking about food allergies from nuts and seeds, especially in children. One of the big causes of food allergies in young children is probably birth born C-section, because the microbiome is very different in a child born C-section versus a child born normal. So certainly children don't have the agni as well to digest a heavy food like nuts, especially if it's offered as a snack in between meals where it irritates the gut. So nuts are a very tricky food. It requires strong agni, balanced agni. Otherwise, it will lead to the formation of ama, which is what will show up as nut allergies and food sensitivity tests. So when it comes to nuts, first always work on restoring, healing digestion, which is why you're here and watching this video. Once digestion comes to a state of balance, it's always better to have few nuts at lunch cooked versus eating them as a raw snack, which generally irritates. Cashews raw are an irritant to the gut mucosa and they can cause a lot of problems. Almonds should always be soaked. So everything is again non-linear, multifactorial, highly nuanced, but for the most part, cooked nuts, for example, a few nuts in a poha at lunch when digestion is good, is only going to be a nutrient-rich food. Would you recommend after a day of heavy eating at a wedding or an event where we've overloaded our digestive system? The first thing that has to be done after a heavy meal is to respect digestion and allow the digestive system to come back to balance. This could mean, if you have severe indigestion, simply fasting and allowing the digestive system itself to digest any ama that has been formed from an overloaded meal. It could also mean eating a very light meal, rice congee, soup, broth, khichdi for a meal or two, and just allowing the system to restore balance. What is the opinion of Ayurveda on hemp seeds, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds? Overall, Ayurveda did talk about congestive foods, and certainly pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds fall under the a category of foods that can clog the channels of the body. There are body's channels called shrotas, which Ayurveda gives a collective term for all channels: digestive system, circulatory system. Anything that can't be digested or is sticky and clogging in nature can lead to the formation and accumulation of ama, leading to disease. So certainly many of these come under that category. Hemp is very bitter. That said, I think it's all very nuanced. It really goes back to digestion. If your digestion is balanced and you're able to digest good meals and you introduce a few seeds as part of a lunch where you have lots of fiber, vegetables, protein, whole grains, you can absolutely make it work for you. However, I think the wrong trend that we tend to go towards in modern day is that when we get research that something is brilliant, we tend to go and overdo it. Hemp has also come into the spotlight as a plant-based protein source, and relying on a larger quantity of something like hemp to get your protein can only lead to problems. So I think that if you are even plant-based, it's better to get the protein from digestible food sources such as lentils versus relying on hemp as a protein source. But that said, you can enjoy all seeds in moderation, sprinkling a little bit into your meals. What is your opinion on almond milk versus cow dairy? So I think this question is something which is really critical, given that the dairy is certainly vilified today, but Ayurveda is a big fan of dairy. That said, dairy has been corrupted today. It's many times antibiotic and hormones. It can set us up for a lot of food allergies, hormone imbalance. However, there is no comparison between cow dairy and almond milk as a replacement. So if you're looking for the qualities of milk, and if you have access to good quality milk, milk is unctuous in nature, and it can calm down vata dosha. It's a fat that very quickly penetrates. It's an ojas food, which means it nourishes the body very quickly. Almond milk, on the other hand, is more drying in nature. While it is a little sweet, it is not unctuous. So almond milk can be more vata aggravating for somebody who's also already off balance in vata dosha. But this doesn't mean it's this or that. If you're plant-based and cow dairy is not an option, there are other foods that are soft in nature which can give the qualities of milk that you've removed, such as moong dal, sweet potatoes. So it doesn't have to be a replacement of something that looks similar. Almond milk can be enjoyed by all of us. It's really delicious, but I think we need to consider two things. One is that, are we making it naturally or are we buying it? So certainly when you buy almond milk and you look at the ingredients, there's so many. There are thickeners very often. While they might be natural forms, they're really very small amounts of almond, and it's mostly bulked up with these thickeners. So that doesn't really help us. I like to make almond milk at home, where I soak almonds, peel them, blend them smooth, and then mix them with water. I don't use a nut bag to squeeze away the almond meal. I actually like the almond milk as it is. I think there is benefit in almond milk as well, but if at all you're gravitating towards it as an option to cow dairy, know that there are other options as well. And home is best, and don't remove the almond meal if you're using it at home. I felt horrible after eating pesto. Is pesto a problem, and am I allergic to pine nuts? Pesto is not the problem. I make a series of different pestos all the time. I think when we buy pesto, one of the things that it has a lot of Parmesan cheese, and cheese is a problem for a wide range of people. So the problem is not in the pesto. The second problem is that very often naturally made in a store, pine nuts are used raw, and they can at times irritate a weekend gut. So if you're reacting to it, it means there's imbalance in digestion. Usually when I make pesto, I take time to slow roast a walnut, let it cool completely, then I powder it, and then I use fresh basil leaves, fresh olive oil. If at all I'm using garlic, and I know Ayurveda is not a fan of garlic, but sometimes like pesto, we certainly want garlic. I just make sure that I saute it in a little bit of warm oil and cut the irritating quality of the garlic, and then make it. So all of these nuances matter. What is the best option for a breakfast when you're at a hotel and options are limited? I think this is a thing that I've struggled with over the years, because breakfast buffets are such a big thing when you travel. And I have had to train myself not to fall into that path of this heavy breakfast buffet, because nothing kills Agni like eating a massive meal at the start of the day. So I really encourage you, if your choices are limited, pick things which are cooked and warm versus raw. For example, oat porridge versus granola, or pick things that are cooked and easy, freshly cooked. So certainly something like an Indian cooked breakfast at a hotel versus having white bread toast and some eggs, which will most likely be farmed eggs. So choose any food that looks freshly cooked, it's hot, it's moist, and eat very little like you would at home, and don't give in to the massive breakfast buffet. If you've enjoyed this video, I really appreciate you subscribing or sharing it with a friend, and I'll see you next time for another episode on healing digestion.